Matthew chapter 2, verse 13. Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Rise, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. And he rose and took the child and his mother by night, and departed to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Out of Egypt I called my son. Then Herod, when he saw he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem, and in all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more. But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Rise, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead. And he rose and took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and lived in a city called Nazareth, that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled. He shall be called Nazarene.
Confidence is everything. I was going to start by speaking of some of the great city crashes over the years. 1974 is the first one I have any recollection of, largely because one of my relatives was a partner in a firm, a bank in those days, when they were privately owned. And when everything went south, that was it. And people lost everything in 74. You may remember those extraordinary images of people in Wall Street throwing themselves out of windows. Confidence is everything, especially here in the city. And many here will have lived through numbers of times when confidence has gone. 9/11 brought fear and uncertainty, 7/7. The insurance markets in the 80s and 90s had periods of extraordinary lack of confidence. And then there was the global financial crisis and Brexit and the pandemic. And then last week, confidence is everything. There's a difference, isn't there, between confident assurance, credibility, and mere bluster and bluff. And there is such a thing as misplaced confidence. It struck me after a number of years working here in the city that you can get away with a lot of bluster and bluff for a long time before one gets discovered. And many a city tumble has come as a result of misplaced confidence. Well, our issue this afternoon is to do with confidence, and the issue is far greater and more important than the value of sterling or the strength of the dollar or the price of gilts. There's something much more pressing for us in the city than interest rates or mortgage repayments, pension funds or bond markets. The author of Matthew's Gospel wants to persuade us ultimately that all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to Jesus Christ. Those are Jesus' closing words. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. And he wants to persuade us, if we're Christian disciples, to go and make disciples of all nations. This is a matter of life and death, heaven and hell, judgment and salvation. But can we have confidence in what Matthew is writing? And up front, his aim is to give us just that. The way Matthew does this is by charting the first steps of Jesus there in chapter 2, verse 13 following. But it's not an early days kind of home video with the first meal, the first handprint, the first word. No, the incidents we've just had read for us are, well, they're shocking, they're real, The flight to Egypt is forced migration. We're all too familiar with such things. And the slaughter of the innocents is human wickedness, and we're all too familiar with such things. And the seeking of a safe house, well, we're familiar with that idea. But Matthew's point is that every step of the way, Jesus is mirroring aspects of Israel's history and fulfilling particular promises from God's interaction with his people down through the centuries, such that we can be confident. And at every stage, you'll notice that Matthew points this out. You see verse 15 at the end of the verse, this was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken. And you see in verse 17 of our reading, this was to fulfill what was spoken. And then in verse 23, that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled. So it might be tempting simply to dwell on God's protection of the baby Jesus, which is sovereign and supernatural. And that on its own has got so much to say to us that God is determined that this child should be preserved. There is a special purpose for him. But I want to suggest that Matthew's deliberate choice of specific passages from the Old Testament is given to us for our confidence and also to fill out, if you like, something of the content of who Jesus is and what he's come to do, so that we can take hold of the Christian gospel as Christian disciples, or if we're investigating the Christian faith, we can recognize that the Christian gospel, there's credibility here, centuries of it. So 3 simple points around the 3 fulfillments of prophecy. Hosea, out of Egypt I called my child. The point is this: God's love for his wandering child. Jeremiah, weeping and loud lamentation, God's work in a wicked world. And then the prophets and Jesus' rather unsalubrious postcode, God's mission for a fallen people. God's love for a rebellious child. This is verse 13 through 15. Prior to the coming of Jesus and a full revelation of himself in Jesus, at any point when God was doing something out of the ordinary, God communicated with particular people by dreams and visions. Think of Joseph in the book of Genesis, Daniel. Dreams and visions and revelations were very, very rare, sometimes just once a century, if that. They were not the normal means of communication, but on occasion, when God was doing something really out of the ordinary, of great significance, he would communicate by dreams and visions.